Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Sudanese protesters keep up calls for a handover to civilian rule in the wake of last week's ouster of longtime leader Omar al Bashir. Crowds aren't content with the sacking of top prosecutors by the country's new military administration. Also, in Algeria, demonstrators are also unhappy with their transitional chiefs. Calls for a more profound political shakeup following the resignation of Abdelaziz Bouteflika earlier this month sees the head of the Constitutional Council bow out. And South Sudan continues to tread a rocky path to peace. Last September's accord between the two sides, behind 5 years of brutal fighting, seems to be holding just about. The future's unclear, but refugees are ready to risk return from neighbouring countries. But first, communities around the world have expressed their sadness at seeing Paris's Notre-Dame Cathedral devastated by flames on Monday, and their relief that enough of the iconic building has been saved for restoration. French President Emmanuel Macron said that he hopes that the monument will be rebuilt in less than 5 years. The blaze comes on a particularly important week to Catholics as they prepare for Easter weekend. The near miss of a global treasure has resonated across Africa.
Something like this happening, especially as we celebrate the Holy Week, it's terribly sad. Such a loss.
I'm not a Christian, but I was affected by those images. They kept me up all night.
Our hearts go out to you, our prayers go out to you, and we know we will all find the strength and the intelligence to rebuild this beautiful church.
Seeing such a beautiful and big structure burn like that, and during Holy Week, it's really painful.
It brought tears to my eyes. It's such a beautiful cathedral that's been standing for ages. It's a place of contemplation where one can find peace in their heart.
Well, for a look at some news on the continent, Uganda said that it would consider granting asylum to toppled Sudanese leader Omar al Bashir. He's wanted by the International Criminal Court over genocide in the Darfur region, but his 3-decade-long rule came to an end last week in a military coup. Protesters are still demanding more political change, and in a bid to appease ongoing demonstrations, on Tuesday, the Transitional Military Council sacked 3 top public prosecutors. Shirley Sitbin has more.
Protesters at home and African Union officials in Addis Ababa are pushing the Transitional Military Council, or TMC, to step down. The military toppled Omar al Bashir, taking power for a 2-year transition. That's unacceptable, said the AU, urging them to transfer power to a civilian cabinet within 15 days or be suspended. Holding talks in Addis Ababa, Transitional Council members said they were not alarmed.
Our intention is to choose the right prime minister as soon as possible. We are in the process of doing that. The African Union's decision motivates us to follow through.
The Transitional Council met Tuesday with Ethiopia's prime minister, who hailed the transition, yet backed protesters calling for change. In Khartoum, the military met with the Chinese, British, and Dutch ambassadors. Mounting pressure since Omar al Bashir was toppled has led to a series of resignations and dismissals. On Tuesday, 3 public prosecutors were fired as protesters demanded.
Well, Omar al Bashir's ousting, came not long after Algeria's longtime leader Abdelaziz Bouteflika quit on April the 2nd after 20 years in power. Algerians are also still protesting, calling for a broader political overhaul. Under mounting pressure from the streets, the head of the country's Constitutional Council quit on Tuesday. Interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah and Prime Minister Noureddine Bedoui are also facing calls to exit. Monsef Ait Kassi brings us more from Algiers.
After the announcement by the magistrates and the mayors and administrations to boycott the presidential elections of July 4th, A new demonstration reinforces the probability that elections within 90 days will be politically impossible. Tayyip Bel-Aziz, now former president of the Constitutional Council, presented his resignation this Tuesday during a meeting with members of the Constitutional Council, and just hours before the speech of Chief of Army Ahmed Gaid Salah, a resignation that intervenes against the background of political crisis. The popular movement demands the complete departure of the system. The Algerian people will not be satisfied with this resignation. What the Algerians are asking for is a real transition process with a neutral and credible government. That means that the prime minister will have a hard time holding out. The people are waiting for Bouteflika's entourage that are still in place to disappear. It's the presidency of the state, the government, and the National People's Assembly. So the students came out today for the 8th consecutive Tuesday. They were very organized, not at all afraid of police repression, and they were not afraid of it. And once again showed brave in a peaceful way, demanding the departure of the system. Once they learned of Bel-Aziz's resignation, they said they were happy, but that this was not enough to calm their anger against a system that does not understand them and whose people no longer want. Meanwhile, General Ahmed Gaid Salah said today that the National People's Army has given clear instructions for the protections of citizens, and especially during marches. This decision is irreversible. So this is a strong response to the police repression and a very strong support.
Munsif Ait Kassi there for us. Now, the family of a Kenyan man killed in the Ethiopia Airlines crash, which claimed 157 lives, is suing Boeing. 29-year-old engineer George Kabau was one of 32 Kenyans on board when the 737 MAX 8 went down on March 10th, shortly after takeoff from Addis Ababa. A faulty sensor data readings believed to have sent a controversial computer system haywire, the same system linked to the fatal Lion Air flight from Indonesia, in which 189 people were killed last October. Dozens of families are suing Boeing over those deaths, and 3 lawsuits have so far been lodged over the Ethiopian Airlines crash. Though the two sides of South Sudan's civil war have struggled to stick to the terms of the latest peace deal, last September's negotiations have led to the longest lull in fighting since 2015. Rebel leader Riek Machar said that it may well be another 6 months before he could form a government with President Salva Kiir's administration. But the exhausted refugees are already gambling on returning to their war-ravaged homes. Take a look.
Back home after 5 years in exile in neighbouring Sudan, Joel Deng, her husband and their 5 children fled South Sudan's second city of Malakal to escape the atrocities ravaging the country in 2014.
People died, lots of them. People could literally walk on dead bodies across Malakal.
Her family has sought refuge in Udia in the northeast of the country, a quiet village on the border with Sudan and Ethiopia. Refugees from across the country are staying here, waiting to see if the peace deal holds before returning to their homes.
We were being killed in Juba. We were shot at by people we didn't know at around 3 a.m. They burned down houses, killed our kids.
It's the first time since 2015 that a peace deal has lasted in South Sudan. The power-sharing deal will be the 3rd attempt to reconcile Salva Kiir and his opponent, Riek Machar. Their rivalry kicked off a civil war in 2013 that left around 400,000 dead and nearly 4 million displaced. In this camp in Juba, residents say they are waiting for the formation of the unity government that's meant to be taking place next month.
When the peace comes, everyone wants to go back home, where there shall be no killing or beating. Then we can return home and stay in peace. That's all.
Everyone's waiting to see if Riek Machar returns to Juba as planned in May. A prior peace deal collapsed just months after his return in 2016, sparking even worse violence.
We should be further along, and we're getting a little concerned that the momentum is starting to slow. And momentum slows, frustration sets in, might lead to anger, and then who knows after that.
But aside for some small gestures, such as the freeing of opposition prisoners, progress so far has largely stalled.
Well, that's it for Iron Africa for now. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.
Because a new page of history gets written every day. Because breaking news can't wait. Information everywhere. In all situations. On every subject. Understanding the world. Imagining the world. France 24. A different take on the news.